Over 1 million people. 1 million individual signatures on a digital petition, all screaming the exact same demand into the void. Sell Kylian Mbappé. If you monitor the pulse of the internet right now, the noise is absolutely deafening. The collective rage of the Madridismo is boiling over. They are calling him selfish. They are labeling him a mercenary. They are pointing their trembling fingers at a luxury yacht floating somewhere off the sun-drenched coast of Sardinia, while the greatest football institution on earth burns to the ground. But if you genuinely believe that a rudimentary website, thrown together by an angry fan, is the mechanism that keeps Florentino Perez awake at night, you are entirely missing the point. The most dangerous thing Kylian Mbappé did this week was not stepping onto that boat with Esther Exposito. The most destructive act he committed had absolutely nothing to do with the Mediterranean Sea. It was a single, deliberate tap on his smartphone screen. To truly comprehend the absolute gravity of the crisis currently paralyzing the corridors of Valdebebas, we have to step back and examine the canvas of desperation that Real Madrid is currently painted on. It is May 2026. This is a club that does not merely desire success. It demands it as a basic human right. They operate entirely on the currency of absolute, undeniable supremacy. Yet, as we stand here today, they are staring down the barrel of a second consecutive season without a major trophy. The white shirts, usually a symbol of invincibility, have become impossibly heavy. The air inside the stadium is toxic. And looming on the immediate horizon, scheduled for the 10th of May, is El Clasico, a trip into the hostile territory of Camp Nou. For Álvaro Arbeloa and his squad, this is no longer just a football match. It is an executioner's block. If Real Madrid falls to Barcelona, the season is officially dead. And in Madrid, when a season dies, the ensuing autopsy always demands a high-profile body. In the epicenter of this suffocating existential anxiety, where is the crown jewel? Where is the generational talent who was brought in to be the ultimate problem solver, the heir to the Galactico throne? He is in Italy. He is being photographed on a yacht. And the global sports media is having an absolute field day with the optics. They are framing this as a classic, tragic case of a superstar losing touch with reality. They are analyzing his vacation itinerary as proof of a player who lacks the fundamental discipline, the humility, and the reverence required to wear the badge. They look at the pristine blue water, the relaxed demeanor, the sheer detachment from the crisis unfolding in Spain, and they see a man running away from the pressure. That is the version of the story that is easy to digest. It allows the fans to simply be angry at a spoiled athlete. It allows you to sleep at night, believing that Mbappé is merely misguided, poorly advised, or momentarily distracted by the trappings of fame. But there is a less generous reading, and it is the one that actually terrifies the hierarchy of Real Madrid. The less generous reading is that Kylian Mbappé knows exactly what he is doing. He is not running away from the chaos, he is actively orchestrating it. When a player of this immense magnitude, a player possessing one of the most ruthless, sophisticated PR machines in the history of modern sports allows himself to be photographed lounging on a yacht just days before the defining match of his manager's career, it is never an accident. It is a highly calculated display of untouchability. You look at the yacht and see a vacation. I look at the yacht and see a man proving that the rules of gravity, the rules of the club, simply do not apply to him. While Álvaro Arbeloa is sweating under the intense tactical microscope, desperately trying to figure out a way to salvage his job and his reputation, his star player is demonstrating to the entire world that the manager has absolutely zero leverage over him. The media is obsessed with the 1 million signatures. They are distracted by the fan outrage and the aesthetic of the yacht. But the real story, the terrifying undercurrent of this entire saga, is the geometry of power. Mbappé is not destroying the dressing room by accident. He is testing the structural integrity of the club, tearing down the old hierarchies to see who is left standing in the rubble. And as we are about to see, the true assassination attempt on Álvaro Arbeloa's career wasn't physical, and it wasn't a holiday. It was digital. Let's move away from the noise of the internet and step inside the meticulously guarded walls of the Valdebebas training complex. To understand the anatomy of a dressing room coup, you have to look at the geometry of the player's isolation. The cracks in the foundation did not start on the Mediterranean coast. They were visible weeks ago, radiating from the touchline during the match against Real Betis. When a player of Mbappé's stature is substituted while nursing a minor injury, There is a standard protocol of optics. You walk off the pitch, you acknowledge the manager, you take your seat on the bench, and you project an aura of support for the collective. Mbappé adhered to none of these protocols. He departed the field projecting an aura of palpable irritation. He offered a greeting to Álvaro Arbeloa that was so spectacularly cold it bordered on absolute zero, and he fundamentally refused to communicate the reality of his physical status to the coaching staff. That is not a momentary lapse of competitive frustration. That is a deliberate withdrawal of consent. It is a physical manifestation of a player actively deciding that the manager's authority simply does not extend to his orbit. Former French international Emmanuel Petit recently distilled this creeping dread into a quote that initially sparked defensive outrage, but has now become the prevailing thesis among the Madrid hierarchy. Petit stated, without hesitation, that Mbappé brought selfishness into the dressing room. This is not the trivial selfishness of a forward refusing to pass the ball inside the penalty area. This is a structural, institutional selfishness. According to deep background reports from L'Equipe, this selfishness manifests in a very specific, calculated manner within the squad dynamics. Consider the behavioral data points. There is the reported incident of arriving late to a mandatory collective team meal. In any functioning football environment, this is a cardinal sin, usually designed as a microaggression to test a vulnerable manager's willingness to enforce discipline. More crucially, there is the visible segregation. Mbappé has reportedly formed an almost impenetrable social perimeter, restricting his genuine interactions almost exclusively to the French-speaking contingent within the dressing room. The generous reading of this situation is that a marquee signing, burdened by an astronomical price tag and suffocating expectations, is naturally gravitating toward the linguistic and cultural comfort of his compatriots while he struggles to integrate. The less generous reading, and the one that Arbeloa is currently choking on, is that Mbappé has absolutely no intention of integrating into the existing Real Madrid culture. He is actively establishing an independent state inside the locker room, by alienating the broader squad and isolating himself from the established veterans. He is starving the manager of the one resource a coach desperately needs to survive a crisis: collective unity. When you are the most valuable asset in the organization, you do not need to lead a vocal, aggressive rebellion to destroy a manager. You simply have to remove yourself from the collective ecosystem. You create a void. Arbeloa was appointed to build a cohesive tactical machine, a system where all 11 pieces operate in absolute, trusting synchronization. But how do you synchronize a machine when the most expensive, most powerful gear explicitly refuses to interlock with the rest? You cannot. The system inevitably breaks down. And historically, at the Santiago Bernabéu, when the system breaks down because a Galactico refuses to comply, Florentino Perez never blames the Galactico. But if the physical withdrawal on the pitch and the social segregation in the dining hall were the tremors, the true earthquake occurred not in Madrid, and not in Sardinia, but in the digital ether. This brings us to the absolute core of the crisis, the secret revelation that fundamentally reframes this entire narrative. The yacht, the paparazzi photos, the 1 million angry signatures, they are all a magnificent, blinding smokescreen. The actual weapon was deployed on the social media platform X, and its target was the very foundation of Álvaro Arbeloa's employment. Consider the precise sequence of events. While the footballing world was hyper-focused on the aesthetics of his Mediterranean vacation, Kylian Mbappé's official account registered a like on a very specific post. It was not a post praising his recent performance. It was not a post rallying the fans for the upcoming El Clasico. It was a post explicitly linking José Mourinho with the managerial position at Real Madrid for the upcoming season. Within minutes, as the screenshot reverberated across every major sports outlet on the planet, the like was quietly removed. The generous reading, the version of reality that the club's PR department desperately wishes the public to believe, is that this was a catastrophic mistake. A slip of the thumb by a distracted athlete scrolling his feed, or perhaps an unauthorized action by a rogue social media manager who briefly forgot which global brand they were operating. That is the narrative of a lesser club. At Real Madrid, and specifically within the isolated orbit of Kylian Mbappé, mistakes of this magnitude simply do not exist. We are discussing an athlete who operates with a public relations apparatus that rivals a mid-sized political campaign. Every post, every interaction, every public alignment is meticulously curated, focus grouped, and risk-assessed before it ever reaches the public domain. A player with that level of sophisticated digital infrastructure does not accidentally endorse the termination of his current manager. He leaves a digital footprint. And he leaves it with absolute, calculating intent. That is not a mistake. That is a digital assassination. Let us analyze the specific choice of the hypothetical replacement, Jose Mourinho. Mourinho is not merely a football manager. He is an ideological wrecking ball. He is the ultimate historical symbol of disruption, conflict, and ruthless pragmatism. By linking himself to the ghost of Mourinho, Mbappé is explicitly stating that the current era of Arbeloa, the attempt at calm, methodical, systemic football, has completely failed. He is publicly yearning for a dictator, which ironically implies to the entire world that the current manager has entirely lost control of the state. Furthermore, the mechanics of the unlike are just as crucial as the initial like. The unlike provides the essential ingredient for this type of modern Galactico power play: plausible deniability. If he leaves the like active, it becomes a formal declaration of war, forcing Florentino Perez into immediate, public disciplinary action. By removing it, he creates a shadow narrative. The structural damage is permanently inflicted, the screenshot is immortalized, the media cycle is violently hijacked. The manager's authority is undermined globally, but officially, technically, nothing happened. It leaves Arbeloa swinging at ghosts. How do you officially discipline your star player for an action that has officially been erased? You cannot. By utilizing his global platform to execute a public vote of no confidence, Mbappé bypassed the traditional channels of locker room diplomacy entirely. He did not need to confront Arbeloa in front of the squad. He did not need to leak his dissatisfaction to a trusted journalist at Marca. This action is known in the high-stakes environment of the Bernabeu as the message. It is not directed at the fans. It is certainly not directed at Arbeloa, who is now effectively a dead man walking in his own technical area. The message is directed exclusively upwards. It is addressed directly to the executive board holding court in the VIP suites. The underlying text of that fleeting social media interaction is brutally clear. The current ecosystem is failing. I am the future of this institution. He is the past. Make your choice before Sunday. The 1 million fans signing the petition are reacting to a symptom: the perceived arrogance of the Yacht. But they are completely blind to the disease. The disease is the absolute realization that the traditional hierarchy of the football club has been inverted. The employee now has the power to publicly interview his boss's replacement, while sunbathing in Italy, and face absolutely zero consequences. He is, by every definition of the word, untouchable. When confronted by the assembled press corps, thirsty for a reaction to the digital earthquake that had just unsettled the entire footballing landscape, Álvaro Arbeloa attempted to project an aura of absolute indifference. He leaned into the microphone, his expression hardening, and delivered a line clearly rehearsed to diffuse the tension through the sheer force of dismissal. It did not work. I don't care if Mbappé likes Mourinho, Julia Roberts, or anyone else, Arbeloa stated, attempting to brush the digital dirt off his shoulder. The generous reading of this press conference is that Arbeloa is a manager completely focused on the tactical preparation for El Clasico, refusing to be drawn into the petty soap operas of the modern era. It is the posture of a stoic leader navigating his ship through a storm, ignoring the lightning. It frames him as the adult in the room, prioritizing 3 points at Camp Nou over a fabricated media circus. The less generous reading, and the one that signals the true end of his tenure, is a profound. That is the desperate, defensive mechanism of a man who realizes he has absolutely no real ammunition left in his arsenal. When a manager possesses genuine, unassailable authority over his dressing room, he does not resort to sarcasm or Hollywood pop culture references when a player publicly flirts with his replacement. He resorts to discipline. If a squad player, an academy graduate, or even a mid-tier signing had executed the exact same sequence of events, the visible frustration on the touchline, the deliberate social isolation in the dining hall, and finally, the digital endorsement of Jose Mourinho, they would be instantly exiled from the first team. Their locker would be emptied. They would not see the grass of the Bernabeu again under this regime. But Arbeloa cannot exile Kylian Mbappé. He cannot fine him into submission, and he certainly cannot bench him for the impending collision with Barcelona without essentially signing his own resignation letter before kickoff. Therefore, because he cannot punish the player, he is forced to publicly pretend that the transgression simply does not matter. The sarcasm is a paper shield. The indifference is a hollow illusion. To invoke Julia Roberts in the press room of the Santiago Bernabéu, a cathedral built on ruthless ambition and political maneuvering, is to fundamentally misread the gravity of the room. Think back to the ghosts that haunt that very seat. Rafael Benitez, Julen Lopetegui, managers who believed, naively, that the tactical whiteboard could protect them from the political reality of the Galactico ecosystem. They, too, tried to brush off the early signs of insubordination. They, too, believed they could survive a Cold War with the dressing room's apex predator. It is the final, tragic stand of a manager who has been tactically and politically outmaneuvered by a 7-year-old athlete. Arbeloa is standing in front of the world's media, trying to convince them, and perhaps himself, that he is still the captain of a ship that has already been entirely commandeered by his star passenger. We are now hurtling towards the night of May 10th. Camp Nou. The stadium that has served as a graveyard for countless Real Madrid managers will now host a trial where the verdict has arguably already been written. Consider the absolute, terrifying paralysis of Álvaro Arbeloa's current reality. What is his tactical instruction for Sunday? He faces a paradox that has no mathematical or philosophical solution. If he walks into the dressing room and hands Kylian Mbappé the starting jersey, he completely surrenders whatever fragile illusion of authority he has left. He validates the yacht. He validates the social media assassination. He tells every other player in that room that the crest on the front of the shirt is fundamentally subordinate to the brand on the back. And if Mbappé starts and casually walks around the pitch while Barcelona dominates possession, Arbeloa is sacked. But look at the alternative. Suppose Arbeloa decides to play the martyr. Suppose he attempts to resurrect the ghosts of absolute discipline and benches his €100 million asset for the most important fixture of the season. What happens then? If Real Madrid loses to their eternal rivals without their generational superstar on the pitch, Florentino Perez will not commend the manager's moral courage. He will sack him for gross mismanagement of the club's most expensive asset. Arbeloa is effectively a ghost pacing a technical area. If he plays the star, he dies. If he drops the star, he dies. The 1 million signatures on that petition are begging the club to choose the manager over the Galactico. They are begging for a return to a romanticized era of football where no individual was bigger than the institution. But that era is dead. And at the modern Real Madrid, the institution is built entirely around the individual. So tell me in the comments what you actually think. Is Kylian Mbappé actively destroying the sacred culture of Real Madrid? Or is he simply a Galactico doing exactly what Galacticos have always done, recognizing a weak manager and ruthlessly forcing him out of a club that demands absolute perfection? Is this a betrayal? Or is this just the cold reality of business at the summit of the sport? Come back to this video on the morning of May 11th, after the dust settles at Camp Nou, because one of these two men, the manager or the star, will have played their final card. If this is the kind of deep, unapologetic analysis you come here for, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and welcome to Football DAO. We will see you on the other side of El Clasico.